Welcome back, everyone. I'm Katie Moore, co-host of the Women's Biohacking Conference. And today I'm really excited because I'm joined by Raewyn Guerrero to talk all about avoiding burnout and learning how to really become the CEO of your own health. And we're going to go over what that means in just a sec. But a little bit about my guest today. Raewyn is the Gutsy Executive Coach, the corporate wellness consultant, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a CBT hypnotherapist, and corporate dropout best-selling author and speaker. That is quite a resume, if I can say so myself. After years chasing IBS and anxiety and the conventional medical model while stuck in a toxic corporate role, she's created freedom in her life by focusing on health as the first wealth, with the gut-brain connection as her North Star. Now she guides high-performing women from burnout and overwhelm to clarity, energy, and even so much more, so that they can create the personal and professional impact that they were meant for, with the confidence that comes from personalized, data-driven wellness interventions. Raewyn, that is quite a bio. I am so excited to have you join us today.
Yeah, it's weird when you hear it read back to you out loud. So I was like, whoa, okay, I've done a lot.
Well, there's so many achievements to go over. And one of the things that really did strike me, and I would love to sort of dive in and start the conversation here, is this idea of being the CEO of your own health. Where did you come up with this? It's brilliant. What does it mean for you?
Well, so it's, I can't take credit, so I'm going to give credit to where it's due. So Chris Carr, I don't know if you're aware of her. She's a cancer thriver. She's sort of like 14 years living in upstate New York with cancer, was told she had like a few months to live, but decided to fire her doctors and become the CEO of her health. And, she went down the whole juicing route and is still alive to this day and thriving in her 50s and doing well. She even like outlived her own father, who got diagnosed with cancer, even though she was told she was supposed to die within 6 months. So the CEO of your health came from her. And then I decided to break it down even more, after studying functional medicine, and like, oh, how can we make this CEO an acronym that people can understand, right? So you're going to get clarity when you become the CEO of your health. You get your energy back, and then you take ownership of it. So that was the idea behind the CEO method, which is basically the way that most functional medicine practitioners practice. But I add in a couple extra things just based on, my experiences working in corporate. The CBT, the visualization, the breathwork angle, I feel is something that people don't necessarily always associate with functional medicine, right? Because everyone thinks it's going to be, diet and supplements. And it's so much more like, creating health, creating a person who wants to live a long time and who's got the ability to do that, who's healthy on a cellular level. It's so much more than just like changing your diet and having some supplements, even though those are important. But the vision that you have for your life, the hope that you have for the future, the connections that you have around you, the positivity, the mental attitude is such a huge piece when it comes to being able to live well. Yeah. So that's the essence behind that, my entire CEO method.
I love that. And I really resonated with your story because I too went through the corporate ladder and hit burnout and a wall that was so hard that I literally had to reinvent my life. And I did. And you did too, successfully. So walk me through what that was like for you and how you sort of started to put the pieces together that this wasn't something that the conventional medical system was actually going to take care of in the long term. This was something you had to figure out on your own.
Yeah. I love that we're talking about this because more and more, especially since COVID, like I am meeting women, there are men too, but I feel like women are waking up to the fact that life is more than a paycheck. Life is more than the hustle. Life is more than, getting married, having kids, or whatever it is that your ideal was you were told that it should be, right? Like I want fulfillment. I want to wake up feeling like I have contributed something to someone else's life, that I've made a difference. And that was always a massive part of my upbringing. And I think right before we hit the record button, I was telling you about my grandmother, and her entire ethos, and my mother's as well, was like, if you can help somebody along the way, then your life is not in vain. And, you know, I grew up doing charity work. Like we always did things for other people. That was my entire, like, it's just bred into me. It's my DNA. So, you know, when I hit the corporate world, and it was very, you know, I was in London. London's it's like New York. I think New York's like London on steroids, but London's pretty intense.
Yeah.
And you know, I got there and it was such a journey. You know, I got there with 800 pounds to my name when I landed. It was in the dead of winter. It was like -3 on the runway. They had to de-ice the plane. I'm coming from the Caribbean, by the way. So I had just left, like, you know, I'm talking in Celsius. So I'd left like 25-degree, 30-degree weather, which is like in the 80s and 90s. And then I get there and it's like -3 and you can't get off the plane because we got to de-ice it. It was a really harsh wake up call, like on so many levels, like physically, biochemically, like no sun, you know, for years. And I did that for almost 22 years. You know, starting off just, you know, from ground zero, like I had to go to university. This is what I'm going to do. I got to work 3 jobs because international students paid more than local ones. So I had like 3 jobs. I was teaching. I worked in a Pilates studio. The Pilates thing was like probably one of the best things that ever happened to me as well. And we'll get into that in a little bit. Like that really was like a game changer for me. So Pilates, psychology, working in a bank, in that really kind of cutthroat, crazy environment, very masculine, male dominated, lots of male energy. I was in HR, and although HR is dominated by women, they gave me this well-being program, and my boss was a guy, and he had like a background in political science from Oxford. So he was very, very, you know, politically astute. I was extremely naive, very Pollyanna-ish. I'm like, I just want to help people. And you're nodding because I guess you can relate, because you come in there thinking like, I'm going to make a difference, and nobody wants you to make a difference. They want you to advance their careers.
Right.
So, and unfortunately, I kind of got stuck in this uphill battle where people were like, you know, jostling for wanting ownership of the well-being thing because it was the shiny new object in HR at the time, back in 2010. So there's this whole like minefield going on that I wasn't even aware of, like going on under the surface of people wanting to own what I was doing. And I was doing it well, but they didn't like the direction because I was going down that whole functional medicine route. Like I wanted to start testing executives. I'm like, okay, we need to get baselines of people. We need to know what's going on with their cortisol. We need to da. And they were just like, no, we're never. I wanted to bring in IVs into work. They're like, we're not going to stick people with needles. Crazy. You know, so I had all these radical out of the box ideas that would get shut down. I'd have to keep like trying to pitch why it was you know, what's the ROI on it? What's the cost benefit analysis? And always trying to show like, we have like a sick epidemic of people with psychological problems, people with back pain, people with digestive issues. Like these were like the top 3 things that people were staying away from work for. So I'm there trying to, with the whole, I had a functional brain even before I even, you know, like the functional medicine kind of framework or mindset, even before I had trained in it. Like I was already thinking like, we need to figure out why people are falling into the river so that we can stop them, you know, when they're on the riverbanks. We don't want to be pulling them out, because that's what a lot of corporate wellness programs are like, and employee assistance programs and health insurance in general. It's literally for if you fall over and break your toe, it's not going to help you stop falling over and break, you know what I mean? Totally. So that was the model that I was told I had to operate within, and I was trying to change it, and it just caused so many like little eruptions, earthquakes, all those things. So I had to get out, because, you know, you end up kind of just pushing and pushing and pushing and getting nowhere. And by the time 2016 hit and my grandmother passed away, that's when my come to Jesus moment happened. And I was like, wait a second, this path that I'm down, it's just going to burn me out and frustrate me. And I'm not actually helping anyone doing this. And I'm just hurting myself. So let me figure out a way where I can actually help people and start doing that. And that's how the whole, you know, rebranded, reinvented myself, got into functional medicine, retrained, met Mark Hyman. That's how it happened. Like I went to a lecture that he was giving because I'd been reading his books, and he was in London at King's College giving a lecture. And that was my turnaround. So I didn't quit immediately, but I planned an exit. and got out and set up an online business at the exact same moment. And this is how God works. You know, it's weird. I had planned to be like, I'm going to work for a chiropractor. I'm going to be in an office. Da, da, da. And it so didn't turn out that way. Like my mom got diagnosed with cancer, like right before I launched my business, literally the day before. And my whole big plan of being based in London completely changed. Like I was like, I have to figure out how to do this online. So this was long before COVID and everyone pivoted to being online. I was in 2017. So pivoted to being online so I could be with her because she lived in Trinidad and I wanted to be able to fly back and forth to make sure that she was okay. Unfortunately, she was not a very good patient. So she was one of those people, like I gave her like this whole meal plan, supplements, and her mindset was not in the place to be receptive to that. She's like, no, I'm just going to do what my doctor tells me. I'll have chemo and stuff. So a lot of life experiences have shaped where I am now. And, you know, women's health in particular has become a huge focus ever since actually, and I'm going to go there, ever since COVID, because I saw like a marked change in my clients after that, like after many of them had either had COVID or they had been vaccinated, their hormones started shifting. Some of them started having more seizures, brain health became an issue, mood, energy levels, like really started taking a turn. And I'm like, okay, I literally believe that I was born for this time in the world. Like, because I have seen what life was like before and now, and I was really fired up about it then, but I became even more fired up during that, you know, we were locked down. I was doing all this research. I'm like, well, why are older people the ones more susceptible? You know, and I was looking into melatonin and antioxidants and all the things that we've been told to ignore. Even Dr. Frank Schallenberger's, he had that cool hydrogen peroxide protocol. Do you remember that? Same, like completely. And, you know, like, and when I don't use it, I end up in trouble, like right now. So, you know, like, yeah, you know, you get your nebulizer, you have your H2O2, and your saline and all the things that the mainstream had basically said, like, don't do this, it's dangerous. I'm like, if they tell you don't do it, definitely go do it because it works. And I saw it work for a lot of the people who did listen to me, who said, oh my God, I just got diagnosed with, you know, I've done my test, I'm COVID positive. I'm like, don't worry, you're going to be fine. Just start doing this. And, you know, we mega dose with certain nutrients and we get them back into a good place. So I feel like I'm going off on a tangent, but
no, this is amazing. I just want to comment on the corporate wellness piece because I cannot agree more that corporate wellness especially probably even more post-COVID, but even before COVID, it was a joke. You like at my company, it was like, you get a $50 stipend to go to a gym. And I was like, how is this educating us in any way? You know, and especially like in San Francisco or a big city where there's a lot of tech money, the snacks that they would bring in and the food that they would bring in would be so unhealthy. And it's like, they only had a ping pong table. And it was, to me, it was like, these engineers are sitting at their desks for 15, 16 hours a day straight. You know, how are we not educating them on, you know, proper, like, even just like, posture and getting up and moving around and like, you know, your eyes like get so burnt out from just staring at a screen that there were just so many fundamental things that were left out of this corporate wellness budget that really infuriated me too. Now I wasn't on that end of like creating it, but as, you know, a recipient, I was like, this is BS.
Yeah. I love that you call it, you're calling BS because that's exactly what it was. It was a checkbox exercise and it was super depressing for someone who genuinely wanted to see people thrive. Like, I'm like, how is this helping anybody thrive? Like, all we're doing is facilitating the agenda of the insurance company, you know, and I didn't know I was being particularly outspoken back then. Cause like I said, I was very naive. I'm like, I literally just want the best for everybody here. And like, this is not the best. And we have all the money. Like they were already spending like this and this, you know, I had to do all of this to justify my job too. Like we were already spending like 2 billion pounds. That's like about 2.5 to $2.7 billion on people being sick, on surgeries, on therapy, on whatever, doctor's visits, like consultants. Like we're already spending that money. That's an expense. How about we turn it into an investment, right? Like where
exactly.
So and no one could, like, for whatever reason, they were just like, no, we're not doing that. And I'm like, so you genuinely don't want well people then? You don't actually want well people. You want to keep your insurance contract going. So, yeah. So you're looking and
It's an illusion, isn't it? Right. You start to see that it, not all that glitters is gold. And sometimes they say one thing, but they don't really they're
No,
not
they
really
they were
invested.
bought into it. And I remember one day with the benefits team, because I had a lot of stakeholders internally, and one of the
Yeah.
benefits guys looked at me straight up, and he's no longer there, but he just said like, he said, if we have all these people living longer and living better, he's like, we're gonna have to be paying pensions for longer. So he literally
Oh
said
my
that to me, right? And I was like, oh, that's why they don't want people living longer and living better. So I get it now. And those are some of the things that, they stick with you. And I'm kind of like,
Mhm.
I need to go do my own thing. I'm going to create my own world. I'm going to create my own model. I'm going to do my own and help people in my own way and not worry about things like that. Because when I trained in CBT, they said, look, you want 6 sessions with people. If they're coming to you for longer than that, you are not doing your job, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If hypnotherapy is supposed to be fast, effective, you're supposed to give people the tools to be able to take care of themselves, right? The CBT framework and hypnotherapy. If they are dependent on you, and I had friends who were in therapy for like 2 or 4. One girl I had who was a friend of mine, she was like in therapy for 7 years, and I'm like, your therapist is milking you. Like, that is not what a therapist is supposed to do. She's become a crutch. You are not empowered to look after yourself. So my entire ethos is all about how do we empower people to take care of themselves? Like, you are the doctor of the future, not me, not the practitioner, not the nutritional therapist, not the specialist. You, the individual, you're supposed to know exactly what's going on with your body. So the CEO of your health that's essentially it.
Yeah.
Like, you're the one in charge. You're in the driver's seat. Learn what's going on. Learn what all the check engine lights on the dashboard are saying to you. That's what your symptoms are. They're basically your body alerting you to, hey, pay attention to me. Something's up. I need, I don't know, clean air, clean water, need to get out of a crappy job, crappy relationship, whatever it is, because these are the things that impact us. I talk about this a lot when people work with me one-on-one. I say, you have lived yourself into this situation, because we have really good data that shows that, 90, it used to be 95% of all chronic illnesses were stress or lifestyle related. And we've got like 60% of all ER admissions are lifestyle related. They're down to something that people are doing with their health, right? Or not doing, let's say. So if you got 95% and 60% of ER, admissions are down to what you're doing, then that means you have a huge opportunity to turn things around. That it's literally in your hands, or at the end of your fork, as Mark Hyman says. You have the ability to change the trajectory of your life, and you don't have to be stuck with a label or stuck with a diagnosis. So even the mental health diagnoses used to irritate me. So I worked with the diversity and inclusion team when I was back in the day. Well-being was actually attached to employee benefits and diversity and inclusion. And I had a lot of interactions with them, and they love their labels. They love categorizing people. They're like, oh, I've got a mental health problem. I've got this, I've got that. And I'm like, do you want to stick with that for the rest of your life? Or do you want to be a happy, healthy, thriving, prosperous individual? No, I'm happy with my little label. Like, I want to be an ambassador for whatever, bipolar. And I'm kind of like, why? Why would you want that? Why would you want to be stuck with that? Like, wouldn't you want to have a brain that's working? Wouldn't you want to not be manic one day and then depressed the next? Like, wouldn't you like to be stable? But for whatever reason, people are really attached to their labels, and those types of working environments, unfortunately, they perpetuate that sort of thing. So
I feel like people
again,
get very comfortable with
they
labels, right?
do. They
You
get
fall into a
safe, and they're
bucket.
like, and there's a lot of absolution, just like, and they're absolving themselves of responsibility. That's what's going on with the label. It's like, well, I have this thing, therefore I can't do anything about it. I'm like, actually, I just said 95% of everything that's going on in the world can be changed.
Yeah.
Like, it's down to the way that you're eating, the way that you're sleeping, the way that you're thinking, right? The way that you're moving. So yeah, absolutely. Like, I am totally a believer that everything can be changed. And that might still sound Pollyannish. And, I believed it right up. I mean, my mom did end up passing away. She was not willing to do a lot of the things that I would be willing to do, let's say, if I was in that situation. And I've had a couple, I'm in my mid 40s now. After her death, like, I was sad, I was depressed. A couple of things shifted for me hormonally. And, and I think for women, once you kind of hit that 42, things start to shift hormonally anyway. And then you have like a pandemic, the loss of a parent from a drawn out illness, my body started to change and things were going on, and I had to go and get scans and tests and stuff that I thought was like, oh my God, I thought I was over all this. I thought I was healthy. But you go through a big life drama, a big life event, a traumatic life event, it cellularly will change you. Now, the choice that we have now is like, well, do I accept the change and just go along with the prognosis from the doctor? It's like, oh, you're just menopausal, or you're just this. You're like, well, can't I do something about that? And women's health for me is such a huge part of everything that I'm doing. Like I said, particularly since COVID, because I've seen it shift so dramatically, more bleeding, more fibroids, more endometriosis, just a lot more pain, infertility, brain fog became such a huge part of what's going on with people, the lack of energy after the whole COVID thing. Everyone became very depleted. And we're like, well, how do you fix that? Well, no, it's just long COVID. You just have long COVID. Like, no, there's a reason why the body is not doing its job the way that it's supposed to. It's not producing energy cellularly anymore. So how do we fix the cell to get well? To quote Dr. Daniel Pompa, right? You want to fix the cell, and that's how you get well. You don't just accept I've got long COVID. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. Can I say bullshit?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's putting yourself, giving yourself a label and putting it in a bucket. And it's also, I mean, okay, this is going to be controversial, but it's kind of like the doctors in the medical industry, like sort of like throwing their hands up being like, I don't know what to do, like it's sort of giving them a write-off, like, well, sorry, this is just the way it is. And it's not. So I would love to kind of dive into, especially as it relates to women's health. We talked about some of the trends that you've been observing over the last few years, and what kind of guidance do you provide for women that are coming to you with these issues? And we'll do a little asterisk on that. What about women who are programmed to kind of follow the conventional way, and they say, well, I'm on this like estrogen depletion, I'm on this and this. How do you help steer them off that track? Because it can be really daunting for people.
Okay, I'm going to answer your last question first.
Okay,
right?
cool.
So one of the first ways is to get people to wake up is to educate them, right? So getting them to see that their doctors don't always know what's best. And I have like an entire resource section of my website where there's a bunch of books that I've read, or that, that are sort of, they're kind of like required reading before you even start doing anything else. I'm kind of like, start here. And maybe a couple of them are things like, there's a Sarah Gottfried book in there, The Hormone Reset. It's a 21-day hormone reset. Obviously it takes longer than that to reset your hormones, but you can get started. That's like your kickstart plan. I'm like, start here, read something from, and because the gut brain connection is such a huge thing for me, trying to get people to understand that link between food and their energy, food and their hormones, food and their skin. And the fact that if they're not breaking down their food properly, or they're not eating the right foods, so that's twofold. So you've got to be eating the right things, you've got to be absorbing them. So if your digestion's compromised due to whatever's going on in your life, environmental toxins, whatever, parasites, food sensitivities, whatever that is, we need to figure out that. But I need you to understand that that's where we're coming from. So it's like schooling you in this way of thinking. So we get them started on 1 or 2 books that are short, they're not long, get them going there, watching a couple of podcast, YouTube interviews or things with people like Mark Hyman, or even like Reed hosts a phenomenal series, the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition Health Space Unmasked. They do a wonderful series every single month where they bring in an expert in the functional or natural health space. And that person will come and speak. So they've had Terry Walls on there talking about MS and the way that she reversed it, and about coenzyme Q10 and liver and all the nutrients that are needed for the brain in order for it to function, so that you don't, you can fire up your mitochondria. So watching her TED talk on minding my own mitochondria, watching her TED talk, tuning into some of these other resources, because sometimes people are like, I don't have time to read. I'm like, you're driving or you're commuting, you can listen to a podcast. So here are a couple of my preferred things. I even have a couple of my own videos that they can watch as well. I have like a library of things that, like, you want to learn about the brain and mental health and gut health. Here are a couple of things that I've done, and they're short, 15, 20 minutes. They don't take up a ton of time. So we start with education. Like, that's the starting point, like waking people up to the fact that there is another way. and that it is not all about drugs and surgery. And if those two things don't work, then, oh, don't know what's wrong with you. That's not an option. We know, we can find out. There are ways to find out what's wrong. And I feel so many people have been given that bullshit diagnosis, and myself included. Like, I saw a gastroenterologist who did her scans, did her tests, and she said, she looked at me and she said, there is nothing structurally wrong with you. It must be in your head. And of course, she was right. There was nothing structurally wrong with me. I didn't have a polyp. I didn't have any ulcers, nothing like that. But functionally, I was not breaking down my food. I was not absorbing it. And she couldn't speak to, like, you don't have enough enzymes, you don't have enough elastase, your pancreas isn't doing what it's supposed to, blah, blah, blah. She didn't, because she doesn't know about those things. And that's why working with someone who is functionally trained can help you with that. So getting people to realize, like, your doctor's hands are tied. They are limited within a certain model. They are there, like, and they're brilliant at, if you break a leg or you've had a heart attack, they will fix you. Right. So emergency medicine is really where they shine. Like, they're phenomenal at if something happens and in the moment you have to go get it fixed. But when it comes to understanding, like, and because they are trained, their entire system is basically funded by pharmaceuticals. So their training is to, like, oh, you got this, I got to match it to this pill that I've been trained in how to administer. And we can adjust the dose. And if that doesn't work, then I don't know, you're kind of like a hopeless case. And there is not one single person who is hopeless. Like, I don't believe that. I believe that we can always do the investigative work. I think that's a lazy cop out. Actually, that's just being lazy to say that you can't help someone. Their first, the whole part of their ethos, their underlying, their thinking is to do no harm. For me, it's like, well, how do I make your life better? Like, I need, when someone comes to me, they need to turn out better than when they first met me. And I think Mother Teresa had said that, let no one come to you without feeling happier. And I want, when people come to me, that they walk away like, oh my God, I've had 6 sessions with her and I am like a brand new, happy, thriving, healthy person. And I know exactly what's going on with me. And yeah, I might need to check in with her maybe once a year to get some labs run, but I pretty much know how to figure out, I know how to eat for my body. I know how to nourish it. I know how to think. I know how to de-stress it. I know how to make sure that it's being cared for. So education on those things, that everything that you're doing can have an impact and an effect on what's going on in the body. The fact that modern medicine, unfortunately, pharmaceuticals do not equal health. They don't, they're band-aids, they're band-aid solutions, and they can be used properly in that setting. Like, okay, you have a cold or a flu and you need to get through an interview. You take a couple of Sudafed in order to clear your nose up so that you can breathe through it. But you're going to be working on your immune system is the thing that wasn't working before. So you got to figure out, well, why wasn't my immune system working? What's compromising it? And how do I fix that? And, there's lots of different facets to being well. And I think once people understand that there's no magic bullet, there's no silver bullet to it, that there's no like, oh, I'm going to do red light therapy, or I'm going to take, what's that thing? Methylene blue, and I'm going to live forever, right? Like all these little, the biohacks that everyone's like, I'm going to do this one thing. Like, it's never just going to be one thing. I hate to break it to you. Like, everything that you're doing, when you start training in functional medicine, they tell you everything you're doing is either building the body up or breaking the body down. So if you look at life from that perspective, like, well, is this actually giving me energy? Is it giving me health? Is it giving me joy? Because that's also something that signals to your cells that, to be healthy. And if it isn't, then it's doing the opposite. And then you don't want to be doing that. So you want to spend more and more of your time. And I get people to do a little values assessment at the start as well. It's a little trick that you learn in therapy. You're like, okay, you say your health is important to you. Let's look at how much time and resource you're actually allocating toward it. And very quickly, they wake up to the fact like, oh, wait, I say that I want to be healthy, but I'm doing less than an hour of movement a day. I'm spending less than an hour outside. I am sitting for 8 to 12 or 15 hours a day, like back to our corporate, people in Silicon Valley or wherever. You're sitting for 15 hours a day. No one's designed to sit for 15 hours a day. Like, if we were designed to be sitting for 15 hours a day, we'd be born sitting. We're not, like, right? We
Very
have
good
legs.
point.
We're supposed to be moving. We're supposed, and the act of walking alone, just it's a pump for the body. It gets the heart moving. It gets the digestion flowing. It gets all these different, and I'm not talking about running. It's just like plain old simple walking. It just gets blood flowing. And that's important. We want our circulation to be moving, our lymphatic system to be moving, because that's how we keep the body flushing out toxins. You're hydrating, you're moving. These are basic, and they're not even biohacks. They're just basic, just basic tenets of being alive.
I was going to say, it's so funny because, as a product reviewer, I get asked like, what's the number one biohack? And I'm like, honestly, if you don't have the basics like taken care of, like what you talked about, sunlight, movement, grounding, clean water, clean air, good food, you have no business going to these devices because they're not going to solve it. And it's almost as bad as saying this little pill from the pharmacy is going to solve this issue for me. It's like, I hate to compare the two, but like the pill that you're getting as a prescription and the biohack gadget, like they're almost on the same plane because people are looking at them as like, this is going to solve my problem. It's not if you're not taking care of the underlying issue. Sorry.
No, don't be sorry, because it's still that this for that thinking. Take this to solve that. And when someone said, oh, what do I do for headaches? I'm like, well, why have you got the headache?
Yeah.
Like your headache could be dehydration. It could be a gut problem. It could be a brain tumor. Like, why have you got a headache? Like, if I tell you take a painkiller, that's, I always say it's like, if you just take a drug for it, or if you just go and like, oh, there's a new biohack for headaches, that's literally like turning off the fire alarm rather than putting out the fire. Like, you need to find out where is the fire. So, I like that we're having this conversation because I know that you have an audience that are very educated, and I want to acknowledge them, and they're all looking for the next shiny thing, right? But I'm going to break it to you guys. The next shiny thing is really just like the most basic thing, like go outside, spend time with your loved ones, disconnect from your devices, find out your baselines. I do think like the functional labs are very important because then you know what you're dealing with. And if you are feeling, let's say, not great and you're trying this for that in lots of different forms, whether it's in pills, whether it's in methylene blue, whether it's in the sauna or whatever it is that you're doing, maybe you need some structure around that, right? Maybe you need a roadmap to kind of get, because the order in which you do some of these things is actually important, because you could, someone says, oh, gut health, do I just need to be taking probiotics? Like, that's one tiny piece of it. And there might even be a condition that it's contraindicated for. So you wouldn't want to just be doing that. You would want to figure out, well, why is the gut unhappy? And then work out the steps that you need to take in order to get it back to where it's doing its job. And there might be 5 steps or there might be 7 steps. And that will depend largely on the individual and what their individual issues are. And the only way that you can figure that out is by getting clarity. And that's my first C. And clarity comes from testing.
What I love about the functional medicine space is the holistic practice, right? Because as you mentioned before, like doctors are so siloed, like this one does this and this one does that. And so they're not talking to each other. And sometimes things are so related, but they're in very different parts of the body. So I love that you take this holistic approach. And so, let's look at the gut, let's look at your labs, let's figure out that. But then you also have, with your background in CBT and hypnotherapy, you have like a mental component. And I would love for you to talk a little bit about how you incorporate hypnotherapy into your practice and what that can actually do for a client who's coming in and maybe, like, you got that diagnosis, like might be in your head, right? Like no one wants to hear that. No, anytime somebody says nothing's wrong, it's in your head, that is the worst diagnosis you can give somebody. But it happens more often than not. And so I think there's, definitely it's very necessary for people to address some of the stuff that's going on mentally, because we're bombarded by so much stuff all the time. So let's talk about that component in the holistic nutritional space.
I love that. the doctor, so what the doctors are doing when they say it must be in your head, I call it medical gaslighting, right? Like you're being gaslit, you're being told like there's nothing wrong with you, you must be imagining it, like this is not real. You're like, well, I know my body better than anybody else's, and I'm not a hypochondriac, I'm a pretty level stable person. If I have, and this was my case, so I'm speaking about me specifically, like if I've got cramps that are debilitating every morning and going to the bathroom is an issue, I am not making that up. There's no way I would make that up. Why would I do that? So when I work with someone who has been medically gaslit and they come in and they say, look, I've tried everything, no one can help me. You know, they start from that place. Like I'm a hopeless case. I have tried it all. I'm like, yeah, but you haven't tried me. So let's start there, because I have been through pretty much a lot of that as well. And not just me personally, like with my mother. My dad was in a coma when I was 3 and the doctors basically wrote him off. He was not meant to be alive. He's 70 years old. He's fine. He's climbing coconut trees still, doing very well. So, you know, I know that I've seen like impossible cases become possible. Myself, my own father, some of my clients who've been told you'll never walk again, people are walking, getting out of bed. And I'll tell you a story about a client called, actually, let's protect her name. So we're not going to tell her name's Anna. I'm making up her name, right? And she was in bed for about 3 months. She'd been on omeprazole for several years because she had heartburn. So her doctor put her on omeprazole. And when she came to me, she told me, she's like, I don't know if I'll ever get well again because I can't even get out of bed. I am petrified. I can't walk. I have pain in my chest constantly. And they told me it's heartburn, but she said it feels like I'm getting a heart attack all the time. Mm-hmm. So, and she had children and she couldn't look after her children. And her husband was very worried. He's like, what do we need to do? Like, what can we do to fix this? And I was like, well, we have to shift the belief that, you know, I did her labs. So that's starting point. Like you do the labs and you see what's going on. And I'm like, okay, you know, there was a parasite. There were a couple of gut things that were out of whack. She had SIBO, but that itself is just, you know, a symptom of a larger problem. And I was like, okay, if we could start working on these things and then working on the belief system that you can actually get out of bed and that it is not going to kill you, because she thought like if she put her foot down on the bed, she was going to like have a heart attack and die because her chest would be hurting so much. Mm-hmm. So I had to train her in breathing for a start because she had been hyperventilating with panic that this was going to happen to her. So this is a very extreme case, but someone who has a belief system that if they put their foot down on the floor, they're going to have a heart attack and die. You want to work on that, like, because it's not true, right? It's not true. So I want to show her, and I show her that her labs, it's not actually that bad. And I told her, I was like, I've actually seen a lot worse. So you're totally fixable. So coming from that place of reassurance that, you know, this isn't the worst thing that I've ever seen. I've helped people with much worse get better quickly. I can help you. So getting someone to actually believe that someone's on their side and that they can be helped and that they're not unfixable. That's a mindset shift straight away, right? That they can be fixed and that everything can be, I think Marie Forleo says, everything is figure outable. Mm-hmm. So it is figure outable. And we have our labs to help us do that. So we could start figuring out what's going on and realizing like there's things that we can do. There's steps that you can take. So getting her to slow down her breathing was one of the first things, because I tell you what would happen every time I got on a call with her. The first time she's like crying and she's upset and she's breathing shallow. Within like 5 to 10 minutes of us speaking, the breathing would change completely because I'd start reassuring her. I'd be speaking very slowly as well, because she's all in a ramped up hyper state, hyper vigilant, all the things. We get her to start slowing down, and I'd show her, I said, how is your chest right now? And she's like, oh, it's actually not that bad. I'm like, yeah, because you were able to slow your breathing down. Mm-hmm. And just by slowing down the breath, you were able to start making a physical change in your body. And getting her to connect that dot, it's like, okay, so the next time you feel like that and I'm not around, what do? And she's like, I slow my breathing down. I tell myself that I'm okay. I tell myself that I can do it. I close my eyes. I see myself getting out of bed, putting my foot down. And her case was a little urgent because we'd wanted to get her into the hospital to physically go in the car and get a scan on her chest just to rule out that there wasn't anything else happening. You know, and this is where modern medicine is phenomenal. So I can do all the labs from home. You can collect your poop at home and your saliva and whatever, but I can't do a scan for you. So I want you to go to a hospital and get a scan. I said, like, I just want to rule out that there actually isn't anything wrong with your chest. So please go get an x-ray. And to get her to the hospital, that was her big, like in the first 2 weeks of us working together, she was petrified. She's like, how am I getting into the car? Like, I can't get out of bed. We got her out of bed. Like I saw her 3 times a week for 2 weeks. So I had like 6 sessions with her within like
Wow.
2 weeks. It was like a lot. And we did a lot of visualization, a lot of that breath work. And she was able to get out of bed, walk to the car, go down the stairs, walk to the car, go to the hospital, walk for her appointment after had been practically bedridden for several months,
Wow.
right? 4 to 5 months. So the mindset piece is huge, because telling people, because, there's a line from Henry Ford who says, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And I always quote that to clients over and over. I'm like, if you believe that you can do this, trust me, your body's going to follow suit. It is going to do it, right? So yes, the doctor may have a point, like it's all in your head. Part of it might be true, but there is obviously an underlying biochemical component. That poor lady had been traumatized to the point where she was so petrified of moving that, she was having a panic attack about it, and it was debilitating her. So having someone come in who is reassuring, who can help you tap into your breath, tap into visualization, tap into gratitude, like that's a huge part of my work, particularly for people who are depressed or anxious or feeling overwhelmed, like getting them to take a step back and actually assessing what is working rather than what's not working. It's such a huge piece in being able to shift the way that the brain is wired and the way that it's functioning, because neuroplasticity, it's, what you feed is what, that's what you focus on. It's going to grow, right? So if you are focusing on negative thoughts, negative emotions, if you're in that downward spiral, the fastest way to get out of it is to start, for me, a gratitude practice. 1, stopping and breathing. 2, physically getting out a gratitude journal and writing things down. And you don't have to feel grateful immediately, but just be like, wait a second. Something as simple as like, I woke up today. I woke up. There's sunlight outside. There is clean air outside. I can go enjoy those things. There are people who won't wake up, who won't enjoy those things, who won't have that. There's food in my fridge. I have people who love me. I have got work that's meaningful. And if you don't have those things yet, make sure that you start working toward them. Like, make sure that that's a focus. And like, oh, wait, because there's a funny expression, and I think it's a meme. It says, like, before you diagnose yourself as being depressed, make sure you're not surrounded by assholes. So have you heard that before?
Oh, but I feel like that is spot on.
Right?
It's so true. Yeah.
People try to tell you, oh, you're just depressed. I'm like, no, like maybe I'm in the wrong environment. And it's the same, I live in a desert. If I put a rose out in a desert, what's going to happen to the rose? It's going to wither and die. That's not the environment a rose is designed to thrive in. If you are withering and dying wherever it is that you are, let's say it's a city, let's say maybe it's out in the country and you don't like it and you don't like being surrounded by lots of nothing, then go find where you're supposed to be planted. Go find that. Find your people, find your tribe. For me, I love being around people who are all about, how can I live longer? How can I live better? How can I help other people do the same thing? And when I'm around those people, I'm in my element. When I'm not around them, I'm like, I get small, I contract, I can feel myself contracting, and I don't feel well. I feel drained. So one of the things that you can use your body as a barometer, like, how is my energy after I'm around certain people? So nothing I'm telling you here is costing you a lot of money, by the way. So, right? Everything I'm telling you is like, that's pretty much free. Like, when I'm around certain people, do I have a ton of energy, or do I feel like I need to lie down for like a week? When I do a certain activity, does it give me a lot of energy, or do I feel like I need to lie down for a week? Or whatever, 2 hours or something. So this is the way that you use your body to be your guide, because it's brilliant and it's telling you everything that you need to know in order to function and to thrive. And if you're not getting the sort of support that you need from your primary care provider or your mental health professional, or you're seeing them for 2 years or whatever, like, that's a clue. Like, you don't want to be stuck in that space. Like, you're not empowered. You're literally using someone as a crutch, and you want to become empowered and take charge of your health. then go find someone who's going to give you a roadmap. And the baseline is, like I said, testing, start testing, but also making sure that you are having clean air, clean water, happy people around you. You're surrounded by happy thoughts, and you're doing things that are purposeful. Like your purpose is such a huge factor in how well your cells are thriving. Like if you're doing work that makes you alive and makes you excited, then your cells will be singing, and I see it a lot with women with cancer and autoimmune conditions where they're suppressed. Their voices are suppressed, either in a marriage or in a working situation, or even of past trauma with a family member. Let's say they had a very harsh mother or harsh father. The suppression can lead to illness down the line. So no matter how many supplements you take, if you haven't dealt with the initial trauma or the ongoing trauma or situation, you're not going to solve it. You've got to work on all the angles. You've got to begin from within, ultimately.
Yeah. I heard a quote once that if you were a child, you probably had trauma. Like everyone has some degree of some trauma, obviously some people have it much worse than others. But how much do you address those underlying traumatic issues of your past in hypnotherapy? Is that part of what you discuss, or is that more of the cognitive behavioral stuff?
Because I trained in cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy, it's all intertwined.
It's connected. Okay.
Yeah, it's totally connected. And which is why I liked it, because they were like, hypnotherapy on its own is great, but with CBT, like it's extremely effective. And there are even other forms of hypnotherapy now, rapid transformation therapy by Marissa Peer, that you can do stuff in like one session. I kind of think personally, I do think you need a little bit of time to unpack and for things to percolate and for them to come up, for you to process a lot of what's going on. I know everybody wants to get over stuff really quickly, but, and that's great. And if you can, phenomenal. So happy for you. I've just seen what works for me personally, for my clients also. You need time to process, to percolate, to integrate. There's, the body, the mind, all these things, time is the thing that probably helps people the most, being able to work through some of the stuff that might have happened in the past. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of women who've have had issues with either abuse, when they were younger by a family member, or as they got older, date rape. That's actually a thing. And then they show up and they start telling me, I'm constipated, I've got this, I've got that, and my hormones aren't working. And you find out later on, because it doesn't come up initially, even in the intake, it doesn't always come up like you've been a victim of trauma, because they don't even want to admit it to themselves a lot of the time. But as we build rapport, and that's why multiple sessions can be helpful. Yeah. You build rapport and then someone opens up. And usually by that sort of like third or fourth session, they're saying like, actually, this really all began when this incident happened in my life. And you're like, okay, now we can start getting somewhere. Now we can start getting somewhere, and the supplements will help you for sure, like on that biochemical level. But in order for us to shift out of this place, we need to address, what's happened to you and the way that that's colored your thinking and how it's programmed you on a cellular level to believe that the world isn't safe and that you are in fight or flight, and that you're pumping out all this adrenaline and cortisol because you're scanning constantly for the next threat. And what that's doing to things like your sex hormones and slowing down your digestion, and you're not breaking your food down. So, the breaking down of the food, like, okay, yeah, we can take some enzymes, but like, why don't you have the enzymes?
Right.
Exactly. Why is the liver congested? And I see people who have like, problems with irritability and anger and like flying off a loose, short fuse. A lot of the time there is some sort of issue with the liver, and then usually that's connected to either grief or trauma. So being able to tap into that. So when you see like, oh, your liver's kind of like congested, and we, like, yeah, maybe there is a parasite for sure, but why were you the host for this thing? And we go back, and when we start going back, and that's what's beautiful about the timeline in functional medicine. When you start going back, you realize like, something happened at this point in your life. Either there was an abusive partner, or an abusive relative when you were growing up, something that triggered the body to go into this defensive mode where it goes into either fight or flight or freeze. And when it freezes, things shut down. and then stuff stops working. So things get congested, digestion, liver, gallbladder, those things get congested. So there's usually an emotional component to a lot of this. And, the liver being, I talk about the gut a lot, but the liver is a huge part of that, because after you break down the food, stuff has to recirculate, and the liver is part of that entire enterohepatic circulation. And if it's not doing its job, and particularly with women's hormones, if it's not doing its job, you can have like this buildup of excess estrogen, and that can lead to things like endometriosis, PCOS, even certain cancers, in extreme cases. So addressing the emotional component for me is such a huge part of the work. Like the diet and the supplements, I'll keep saying that over and over. They are foundational in terms of like just getting you to be able to function and to have the energy to be able to start working through some of this stuff. But the real work is when you deal with the underlying causes.
I could not agree more. I have a family member who went through quite a bit of sexual trauma when she was younger, and then 10 years later, she's dealing with the worst menstrual cycles of her life. And I like, as someone who has been in this space for a while and sort of has started to connect the dots, brought this issue up. Like, could this issue that you're facing now be connected? Oh boy, she didn't want to hear that at all. It was like, no, this is something totally not related to that. So, and this sort of, when you alluded to this with talking to your mom, like, I feel like there's probably a lot of women listening who have finally clued in. They've woken up to some of the health issues that they're now facing, but their family, whether that be parents or sisters or any siblings, like, aren't necessarily receptive. It feels like the most frustrating thing, because here you're helping thousands of clients a year, and like, your mom won't even listen. And I have the same thing. Like, my mom just went through breast cancer, and like, trying to help her after that, like, it's been, no, I got to do what the doctor says. Right. So how do you broach those conversations with the people you care about so much when they're just kind of in that stuck mindset?
I actually don't, because I've realized like it hurts. It ends up hurting me more than it hurts them. And watching her not listen to me was extremely frustrating. Like, I would cry loads, because she was so hell-bent on, like, I've just got to do another surgery. I've just got to do another. And I'm kind of like, no, this is not the way, and what I do is I channel that energy now into talking to people who are willing to hear. When someone's not willing to hear, there's nothing, I don't really think there's much you can do. You can plant, what is it they say, take a horse to water, you can't force him to drink. I can send her podcast. Like, I remember getting the, you know who Nathan Crane is? He got, what is it? It was The Truth About Cancer. He had like this fabulous summit, right? I bought the summit. I sat down with her. I was like, we're going to watch this together. And the only so there was this one woman, I can't remember her name. She was like in her 60s. She'd been told in her 40s that she was never going to be able to see her grandchildren. She was going to die, stage 4 breast cancer, blah, blah, blah. In her 60s, no more cancer, living on a pint of green juice a day, doing sauna, Brown's gas, whatever, but alive, playing with her grandkids, very fit, doing yoga. I showed my mother this video and I was like, see, Mom, that could be you. And she's like, but I'll never eat tiramisu again. I'm like, Mom, and I was like, that's what you took away from this person is thriving and she's happy and she's playing with her grandchildren and she's living 20 years past her prognosis. Like, you take away, like, I'll never eat tiramisu. I'm like, what? So when you hit that wall, you're like, you know what? I'm just going to stop. Like, even just saying it out loud just now, I got like a sharp, that was traumatic for me to kind of like hear that. I was like, wow. You would choose sugar over like being alive. And, and maybe that's the cancer too, because the cancer thrives on sugar, and that's what it wants. And it becomes an entity on its own. And to be honest, she didn't even seem like herself anymore coming down to the end. So I'm sorry to hear about your mother. Like, that's
she's doing better. But again, it's like, now she's going through all the post testing and like, and I'm seeing her in a really high anxious state, and also like going and like, this is again the thing that like really frustrates me. And I even said it to her. I said she went through like several MRIs and then she had to do like a full body CAT scan. I was like, Mom, how much radiation are you going
Radiation.
through?
Oh man.
I said, I
Oh.
said, these need to be spaced out way more. You can't do these back to back. And she's like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about that. I'll ask the doctor. I was like, why is the doctor not thinking of this? Like, what? It's like, I get so frustrated when I'm in that
Clown world.
situation.
Sorry, just clown world. It's just clown world,
Like,
right?
like, what?
What? That's
You're
the
in a
stuff that
90-minute
just
MRI and then you're going to be in a CAT scan the next day. And that's when I'm just like, but I'm now the person that doesn't trust much of what they're saying. And so now I'm on the opposite camp and
yeah.
but that's the reality.
It is a reality. And and that's when you can, like I said, like you're like, how do you talk to someone like that? I'm like, you don't, because you just end up being frustrated and your energy needs to be channeled into the people who do want to help you. So you doing things like this and speaking to an audience that is receptive,
Right.
that's where your energy needs to go. And unfortunately, you can't help everybody. You have to help the people who want to be helped. And Reed actually taught me that, because when I'd say like, oh, like, let's say we had a friend who had something and I said, have you told him about blah, blah? He's like, he didn't ask me. I'm like, what? It doesn't matter if he asked you or not. Like, you have to help him. Like, he didn't ask for my help. If they ask for your help, you help them. But if they don't ask, it's not your job.
Right.
I'm like, but what if they don't know? He's like, they know. Like, they know there's a better. I mean, my mother knew. She had a supplement schedule. She had a whole bunch of food. I went, after she died, I went in the fridge to clear it out. The maitake mushroom fusion was in there from like 2017. She died in 2022. Like, it was 5 years. It was in the fridge. It was never opened. The bottle, it was like $100 little bottle, like this big, right? This emulsion that she was supposed to start taking. There's all these things. And I'm like, oh,
girl, I did the same thing. I was buying my mom like Reiki. I was like spending so much money and shipping like things like supplements. Same. And it's like, so you do reach a point where you're like, okay, I did as much as I could. And now I'm going to just like, I think sometimes you just have, especially if you're around them, it's like, you can just lead by example,
That's the only way, you have to live your own life too, where you're surrounded by the people who are going to listen to you and who are going to make you feel like, okay, I'm not doing this in vain. Because I honestly, it's interesting we're talking about, as I told you about my corporate career, I felt like I was pushing water up a hill. I was like, I did that my whole life with my parents too. And like, how did I end up in this environment where I'm doing the exact same thing? I'm repeating. So like, I was like, okay, universe, I have a lesson that I need to learn here. I need to really just be around the people that are going to listen to me, rather than constantly trying to rearrange the world outside of me. I can't keep doing that unless, because it's futile. It's just going to make you unwell as well. So
it's like when you're dating the same kind of guy and you're like, why don't you stop? Like, I asked this girl who's been in like 12 different relationships. And I was like, how did you meet this person? She goes, I've met every guy at the bar. I said, then stop meeting guys at the bar. like if you don't learn your lesson by then, but then you have to commit to change. It's not going to happen for you unless you decide, right? Like,
completely, if you want change, you have to change. You can't keep like, oh, I'm just going to change a partner. I'm going to change a job. Or I'm going to change a country, which is what I was doing. I'm like, oh, I went to England. I went to dinner. And I was like, oh, wait a second. I got to start with me. Yeah. I got to start with what's going on inside of me and working through my stuff. And let me tell you, folks, even though I say like, okay, you don't want to be dependent on a practitioner and be constantly seeing them, your work on yourself is never going to be done. Like, part of being alive, especially as you go through different decades of your life. Like, I saw what the 20s were like. I saw what my 30s were like. They're different evolutions, and you change and you grow and you see things in a different way. And when you hit your 40s, I mean, I'm looking forward to the 50s, because I'm going to curse again and I apologize.
No, go ahead. I love it.
Like, you're going to get to like the zero fucks given stage where it's just like nothing is going, you're like, I'm not listening to that crap. Like, I'm not going to internalize that anymore. And very recently I just came back from Trinidad, and that's, my brother got married. It was very sad that my mother wasn't there because he was her baby, blah, blah. So it was very, very emotional. We were selling the house that we grew up in. My dad just wanted to let it go. So it stirred up like a ton of stuff. And I told Reed, I said, whenever I come back, I need like about a month to get over,
Mm.
being in that house and all the stuff and knowing that I'm never going to be in that house again and all that stuff. So I think that's one of the reasons why I did actually get ill on the way back. Like I came back and I'm like, I don't feel so good. I have a respiratory infection, whatever. Like I don't feel amazing, because these big shifts, like they sometimes require time to process. And the way that my life is now, it is very much on the go. Like I have a very active practice. I have an active husband. He loves to travel. He loves us doing lots of things. We're very social. We like connecting with our tribe. But I couldn't go straight back into that because I'd just been through this massive life shift. Massive. Like I don't even think I've processed yet how big a shift that is. I think when you're young, you're just kind of like, okay, on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. But as you get older, you need to take stock. You need to stop, reevaluate, internalize some of it, release it, rather than just channeling through from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And then 20 years later, you wake up and like, oh, I have a chronic illness. You're like, well, why? Because you haven't processed any of the crap. So I've learned that slowing down is actually how you get more done in your life, and more in the sense of like, you get more out of it. Like it's more fulfilling, more enriching, more rewarding ultimately. So mourning the loss of, both my mom, my family home, the fact that she wasn't around for the wedding, those were big things. Those are big moments, and they require, you need to honor them. You need to honor the fact that your body and your brain needs a minute to catch up. And sometimes you get knocked down with being unwell. Maybe that, and I said, okay, this is taking me to the next stage. Like I've just closed a chapter on my childhood, like after, 44 years or whatever, I've closed that door. I need to honor it. I need to take stock. I need to rest. I need to process. I need to have a vacation or whatever, like just sit with that kind of stuff. And we spend so much of our time. Iris Dement has this song called Got No Time to Cry. I don't know if you guys know who she is. She's like a famous country singer.
Yeah.
If anybody ever saw True Grit, the new movie, she is like they use her voice throughout the whole thing, like her music. But she has this fabulous song called I've Got No Time to Cry. And it's literally like about how we live ourselves into exhaustion and we don't process anything. Because we're just going through have bills to pay, a house to pay, and what did you say? I have bills to pay, a house to make, a home. It was literally like, I've just got so much to do that I don't have time to process the fact that my mother died, my father died, I buried my husband. And it's a country song, so it's sad, right? Yeah. So, but the reality is that we are so stuck in this treadmill or hamster wheel, actually is probably a better expression. We're stuck in that hamster wheel of the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And are we actually going where we want to go? Are we living intentionally? Or are we, and having a parent with cancer or having lost someone to cancer, you take stock of these things. And by the way, 1 in 2 women will have cancer. Yeah, 1 in 2. It's 1 in 3 men and 1 in 2 women. If anybody read Dr. Naisha Winter's book, The Metabolic Approach to Cancer, that's another one that's required reading on my list. And like if you want to protect yourself, because everything in our current world is designed to kind of poison us, unfortunately. Our water, not good with the fluoride and all the crap that's put into it. Our air, depending on where you're living, if it's a city, probably not great for you with the benzene and the CO2. Not amazing. So you want to be very mindful of the fact that you are in a toxic soup, and you have to be making sure that your detox pathways are working really, really well, because that will impact things like your hormones, like your energy, like your mental health, like your performance. And, because if you're toxic, you can't function. Right. If you may be functioning, but just not very well, not at your best. And if you want to show up in the world for people, if you want to be someone who's vibrant and full of energy and is able to actually do things that you feel inspired to do and called to do, you need energy to do that. And if you don't have energy to do that, then how are you going to fulfill all those dreams? And I feel like pharma, unfortunately, like their whole mission is to make sure people aren't fulfilling dreams. Like, well, let's just keep you medicated. Let's keep you drugged. Sorry, I'm going there.
It is the reality. And I think that's one of the things that is so refreshing to have someone like you on and talking about like ways to really help people shift their mindset. So as we're wrapping up today, Raewyn, I'd love for you to kind of tell people how they can work with you and other ways to connect with you, because I think you have a lot to offer.
Thank you. I would love to, help anyone who feels like, wait, I need some structure. I need a roadmap. And I will follow the roadmap once you give it to me. And I'd like the baseline of my testing. So you can find me at the gutsyexecutivecoach.com, all one word, just gutsyexecutivecoach.com. And I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn. You can look for me under my name, just Raewyn Guerrero on LinkedIn. And on Instagram, it's the same thing, just Gutsy Executive Coach. Very simple. I also have a free online community in Facebook. I post in there pretty regularly. I do weekly lives, ask the expert type lives, live Q&As. So you can pop in there as well. And I can give you the address in the show notes because it's pretty long. So
yeah. We'll put everything in the show notes for people to connect with you. But this was a really beautiful, and again, like we hit a lot of different aspects of functional medicine and health, but I just appreciate so much of what kind of work you're doing in this space and the integrity that you're bringing to your business. And it's really inspiring. So thank you, Raewyn, so much for joining us. And for everyone else tuning in, we have another amazing speaker coming up here on the Women's Biohacking Conference.